to our town. Dorothy Thompson speaking to you from the grounds of the Brewer Public Library, where I've been kind of looking around for morels. And in fact, mushrooms will be the topic of our show. Presentation given recently right here in the library by John Cronk on foraging for mushrooms.
I talked on Intro to Mushroom Foraging. First of all, I'd like to thank the Brewer Library for allowing me to talk about one of my favorite subjects, foraging for mushrooms. So thank you, Stacy. Since it's the day before Mother's Day, I think it's only right to thank all the mothers too. I feel like that could be an everyday thing, just like Earth Day. You don't need one special day to celebrate them. My name is John Cronk. I've been into foraging for mushrooms for maybe over 20 years now. Kind of started out pretty passively, and some people would say that maybe I've gotten a little more obsessive about it, but that's not a problem, I don't think. Find out if you guys care for a moment. Mushrooms are kind of having a moment where they're getting pretty popular, with names like Devil's Cigar, Panther Mushroom, Shrimp, Chicken, and Old Man of the Woods, Beefsteak, Fried Chicken, Dead Man's Fingers, Jelly Babies. There's a lot of varieties and some very interesting things to learn about them, so hopefully I'll be able to share some of those with you. And even if I don't convert you all to wanting to eat wild mushrooms, I hope you just kind of will slow down and appreciate them when you see them out walking. So some of the topics that I'll go over today are just reasons to forage, the safety and ethics of foraging, some of the resources I like to use, and just a few tips on maybe having a little more success. Some of the lessons that I've learned throughout the years in the woods. And I'll go over 7 what are considered easy to identify mushrooms. I don't have any or very seldom lookalikes, so those are good ones to start with. And then I'll wrap up with any questions anybody has, but if anything pops up throughout the talk, don't be afraid to ask. So some of the reasons, there's many reasons to forage, but a couple of them are they're free. You can do it anywhere. You can be as prepared of having a backpack loaded with snacks, water, baskets, bags, knives, all the stuff that you could need, or it could just be an impromptu thing when you're out and you see something that looks good and you make do with what you have available then. It's something that you can't find in a grocery store, so you get to eat some pretty unique foods. And like a lot of things, the cultivated varieties might look nicer, but you can't compare with the flavors of wild food. Mother Nature's kind of unbeatable that way. I do like the reasoning that when you eat something that grows in the land where you live, you actually have a part of that land and carrying that with you, so that's kind of a cool concept. It's good exercise and quality time. That's my daughter Grace. The jury's still out on if she's going to be into foraging for mushrooms. We'll see. She's not too good at it yet because she gives away some of the spots when we're in the woods. I find it very therapeutic just being out in nature, so it's good for your mind, body, and soul. Kind of good to unplug and get into an area where you don't always have cell service. It's a very primal feeling to it, that it feels like something that humans have done for thousands of years, so definitely your ancestors did it at some time. It is a skill that can always be learned and added to, so there's never a point where you master it, but the more that you do learn, the more mushrooms, the more plants you know to look for, the more likely you're going to have success when you're out looking. I guess I forgot to ask that at the beginning, but does anybody in here forage? Care to share what you forage?
Mushrooms and wild herbs.
Correct. Lots of good sorrel, dandelion greens, garlic mustard. It's edible and invasive. So
Yep. You
eat
kind
your
of
invasives.
doing a good deed that way, picking them. Yeah. That is one thing that's nice about this area is, a lot of people are into foraging, so it's nice that there's a lot of people. If you have questions, you usually end up finding somebody that maybe has a little more information on that. One of the things that I really enjoy about it too is it teaches you to slow down and just take a notice of all the little things around you. Kind of like the John Muir quote, I think. I don't know, maybe I'm miscrediting him, but anytime you go out in nature, you always find more than you seek. So some of the safety and ethics, Sam Thayer is kind of an idol of mine from Bruce, Wisconsin, that he's got several good books more focused on plants, but he will do some mushroom hikes and things like that too. But his golden rule of foraging is a good one to follow, since there are some dangerous things that are deadly toxic that you don't want to mess around with. So never eat anything unless you're 100% certain it is safe to consume in the way that it is being prepared. Kind of teaches you through the 7 sins of mushroom hunting to don't be a glutton, don't take more than what you're going to use, and if you do have a lot, it's the process of dehydrating, freezing, or pickling them, or finding people that are willing to take them. It's not as hard to find people willing to try morels for sure, but some of the other mushrooms they might be a little apprehensive with. Teaches you to be aware of your surroundings. With some of the hillsides and bluffs around here, you definitely want to watch your steps, or you could end up with a hurt ankle or worse. In that picture you might notice there's a rat snake that I was happy I saw before stepping on it, and luckily rat snakes aren't too aggressive, so it was fun to just watch it. But that's another part that, yeah, you never know what you're going to come out when you're out in the woods, or you don't even have to be in the woods, on a bike trail will do. It's a good idea to learn the poisonous ones as well as the ones you're looking for, just because, like I said, you don't want to make any confusion, and even if you're 99% certain, I think it's not worth the risk. There's some mushrooms in that book, the 100 edible mushrooms, that the edibility rating is bad, and the lookalikes are deadly toxic ones. So to me, that doesn't seem worth the risk. Places to hunt, like I said, is anywhere but public land. We're pretty lucky in this area that we have a lot of public options, and then private land with permission. Some people might be pretty guarded with their morel spots, but if you offer to share mushrooms or even talk to them about them, it's always worth asking. Even if only 50% of the people allow you, it's nice to have those options to hunt on. Don't believe everything on the internet is a good rule in general, but especially for morels, or for mushrooms, sorry, but I have seen this season for morel mushroom hunting that people are consuming false morel. While it is technically edible, especially like European countries have eaten them, it takes quite a bit to process them, and they have a toxin in them, gyromitrin, which is in rocket fuel. And to prepare them, you have to boil them several times, and even during the boiling process, if it's not well ventilated, you can inhale that toxin. It's one that bioaccumulates the more you eat it, and so there have been some fatalities from eating that mushroom. So again, doesn't seem worth the risk to me. And since, especially after a more mild winter, beware of ticks. They're one of the things that's hard to make a good case for enjoying in nature. Some of the things I like to take out when foraging are different baskets, like I have a few stacking, one to carry. I prefer them over bags. I know I've seen people that like mesh bags for dispersing the spores, but I feel like baskets still will do that. Most of the times, by the time you're picking the mushroom, they've dispersed a lot of their spores. And plastic bags, I find, kind of make the mushrooms hard to breathe. And with prickly ash and berry bushes, they can get torn, and then you lose some of your mushrooms out of a hole that you didn't know was in the bag. But I'm not against them. They are on there as extra bags because you never know how much you're going to find, and it's better to use them than trying to make a bag out of a shirt, which I've done, but there's nettles and there's still prickly ash and all that. So my friend Ben always says about nature that you end up getting interested in one thing, but then it leads you to something else. So tree ID is part of mushroom hunting. That definitely helps you to know what mushrooms correlate with which trees to look at. Then you're out in nature and you hear a bird call and you want to learn about that. You see an interesting plant, you end up wanting to learn about that. So like I said, it really is a never-ending skill. It just kind of keeps adding to it the more you're out there. You got to pay attention to the phenology, which is like the progression of seasons. If you're looking for a morel in the fall, you're not going to find it. But then other mushrooms like the shaggy mane, they kind of come up at will, spring, summer, fall. You might think that winter time there's no mushrooms to find, but that's not true. There are wild anopes that grow if it's not too cold. And then even in the coldest days of winter, not so much around here, but northern Wisconsin, there's a lot of chaga that grows, and that's actually the best time to harvest it in the winter. It's easier to see since it's a nice black charcoal looking mushroom, so it really stands out with the white of snow. Kind of become a weather person if you're into mushroom hunting because you want to follow the rain. Since mushrooms only need moisture and temperature to grow. Like last summer wasn't so great with the dry conditions that it made for a lot of walking with not a lot of mushroom finding. But I guess the plus side was there were fewer mosquitoes out, so it's a trade-off. Yeah, I prefer taking a knife, even though the science is still out on if it's better to cut a mushroom at the base or to pluck it. I mean, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference to the mushroom how it's harvested. The reason I like a knife is sometimes like you'll get a little clump of dirt with the mushroom, or some of the ones that grow on trees, they're handy so you don't get pieces of wood coming with the mushroom. And I like to just take a little extra time to clean the mushrooms well so they don't get dirt in them, because some mushrooms are pretty tricky to clean. So some of the lessons that I've learned throughout hunting is the concept of good versus bad. I don't think nature is quite like humans where we label things as good as bad. Like a poisonous mushroom isn't bad, it's just doing what it's supposed to do. I would make a, like I said, I can't make a case for ticks, I kind of label them as bad. So. Again, slowing down is a good idea. I've had a lot of times where I get hyped up in the beginning of the season and maybe going a little too fast. And then coming back on the hike after I've tired myself out a little bit, I noticed I walked right by some mushrooms right in the first place. Or just taking the time to take a breather and you look around and you see something cool. Just like I said, noticing the little things. We're very lucky where we live in the Midwest. We're kind of in the center of the North American continent, so we get a little bit of the best of all worlds. We get some eastern species, western species. In Wisconsin here, we get plenty of rain most years. It's definitely important to protect yourself from sun, insects, and plants, like all the poison sumacs, oak, ivy, wild parsnip will burn you. So I know in some of the hot summer months it's tempting to go out in shorts and a t-shirt, but I prefer having long sleeves and pants on, just help keep ticks off you and protect you from those kind of things. And then I guess an interesting study to share with you about mushrooms was in 2010 in Japan. They did a study with a slime mold fungus where they took a copy the map of Tokyo and laid out oats to dictate like the stops of where the subway system would go. And they let the slime mold fungus work its way out, and it actually developed a more efficient subway system for them. So that's something that Paul Stamets talks about, that with mushrooms kind of being of interest now and more studying being done with them. There's a lot of potential cures and different things that maybe we'll learn, and it's a pretty exciting time for that. So the 7 mushrooms to start with, which I got a handout if anybody else needed any. So like I said, these are Michael Kuo is a good mushroom guy that I like to look. He's got a website called Mushroom Expert, and pretty funny writer. He's an English teacher from Illinois, so kind of close to my heart that he's an fellow English major. But his 100 edible mushroom book breaks it down from beginners to with experience to experts, and it's kind of nice that most of the beginner ones, like I said, don't have lookalikes, and they're some of the tastiest mushrooms in my opinion. So I'm going to go over morels, lion's mane, chicken of the woods, lobster, giant puffball, hedgehog, and black trumpet. They should be mushrooms that you can hunt kind of spring throughout fall, if it's something that's interesting to you. So morels, Mother's Day weekend is kind of always the prime time for it around here. So you'll see a lot of people checking trees, pulling over, all of a sudden jumping out of a vehicle to check a good looking tree. Everybody always says dead or dying elm trees, and it has been some of the best finds as far as amounts of time, but I also look for ash trees, apple trees, I found them around cedar trees. Sometimes you just find them growing randomly in a grassy field, so maybe there was an old root system there that they're growing out of. Like a lot of mushrooms, they do have that symbiotic relationship with trees, so there's definitely some truth to that, to find the trees and find some mushrooms. But my wife's strategy also works, where we make a good team, because she just scours the ground and looks, and I'm kind of looking up to say, let's go try over that way. And so we've had some success. Like I said, there is a false morel. You really would have to squint and try to force it to make it confused for a true morel. But the one telltale sign is a true morel is hollow stem and hollow cap, so they have the saying, if it's hollow, you can swallow. The false morel, when you cut into it, kind of has a fibrous interior. So yeah, I mentioned indicator species, and May apples are one of the best ones that I like for morels when they're about a foot tall. That's usually a good sign that the soil temperatures have gotten to where the morels will be growing. False morels are also a good indicator. They come up a little earlier, but it helps you know that you're in the right area, since they kind of like to share the same spots. Yeah, I have, on most mushrooms, they either grow from trees or grow from the ground, because that's a good way to know which mushroom you're after too. Yeah, with most mushrooms too, they will grow in similar spots year after year, so it's always good to make note of where you've had success. Sometimes you will just find one random growing by itself, but a lot of times they will grow with others around, so it's another reason I like having a basket. If I find one, I'll set it down and mark it, and just kind of walk circles in the area to see if there's any friends growing for it. There's another indicator species there is a trillium flower, which that kind of will let you know that when you see those growing, they're probably coming up on more than just the south-facing slope that they start the season out. That middle one is a false morel, and so the false versus a true morel. I don't think they look very similar. that's all for morels. I'll move on to lion's mane mushroom, which is getting a lot of attention now because there's a lot of research being done on the health benefits of it. It's got a lot of potential for like with neurogenesis, so like it'll help regrow neural pathways. You'll see it in a lot of like mushroom coffee or tinctures. They have it in like dry pill forms now for the benefits. It's supposed to help improve memory. It also has a couple different names that I think are pretty great. So it's also called pom-pom, comb tooth, bear's head, or bearded hedgehog. It's probably my favorite looking mushroom because especially this one, this kind of reminds me of like a frozen ice formation. They're pretty nice to spot because of the bright white like that, usually green all around it. It'll grow on dead or dying trees, usually hardwoods. I have seen several things saying if it's growing on a pine tree that they'd be leery to eat them, just because there could be some toxins in that, but I don't always know if the trees I'm gathering them off what they are, and I've eaten several different ones, so I can't say that I've always followed that rule. They can be quite large, so it's nice. They're not always accessible though, so that's a shame that you'll see them growing 40, 50 feet up in a tree, and it doesn't seem very ethical to cut down a tree just to get a mushroom out of it, so it's better just left to appreciate. They do have a very unique texture to them, so they're a great substitute for crab. And they definitely are a mushroom that if they get dirt in them, they're hard to clean, so I try to just cut that piece out, or like this one's getting a little pink in the spot, where it's kind of showing that it's been there for a while and starting to age a little bit, so I'd even cut that out and not mess with the flavor. If you ever wonder about a mushroom, if it's still good, it's kind of how dense it feels, and also the scent of it. A lot of mushrooms will start having a seafood or fishy scent to them when they're going bad. But yeah, this is another mushroom that year after year I found them on similar trees, and I should probably do a better job of making maps of spots, but it's kind of fun to play a game of memory and try to remember all the good trees. Yeah, just a fun mushroom to look at even if you're not into wanting to eat it. So one of the woods mushrooms, the chicken of the woods, actually has a chicken-like flavor, so it's true to its name. It's one that's very easy to spot with its bright orange color. You can grow just covering the tree, so I spotted them from half a hillside away, and it's always exciting, but then once you get up to them, you got to see the quality of it, because by the time they get to that stage, they're probably not worth eating. They get very dry and chalky tasting. But the other two mushrooms are probably just at the ideal stage. It's one of the easiest mushrooms to clean. It's usually already pretty clean, and it holds up very well to being rinsed. I know that's controversial. Some people say you don't rinse a mushroom because you take the flavor out of it, but I'd rather have it dirt-free and bug-free and have a little less flavor, I guess. There's a couple different types. There's the yellow underside one, so that is also called the sulfur shelf mushroom. And then there's a white underside mushroom of the chicken of the woods, but both have the bright orange tops. Sometimes they can look like they're just growing out of the ground because they'll be growing out of the root system at a base of the tree, but they're usually attached to wood at some point. So another good one to have a knife for getting it off. It doesn't dehydrate very well, but I do like to pickle that, or I've heard of people that will partially cook it and freeze it, since one mushroom can do pretty good for filling your basket. Those ones, again, are probably ideal for harvesting, where they got the nice bright, when you cut into them, they almost exude liquid out of them, they're so fresh. And yeah, they make good for recipes. Any way that you use chicken, substitute those, and they're delicious. So this is a mushroom that, when I say that first line, kind of scares people. It's not actually a mushroom, but it's a parasite. It attacks other mushrooms, including the Lactaria species, agaric species, and possibly Amanita species. So in Michael Kuo's book, he labels it as a, I think, either experience required or expert mushroom, even though you won't confuse it for any other mushroom, just because you can't really know which mushroom it's a parasite attached to just by looking at it. Like, I have no idea what mushroom that was originally, but it is one that kind of will grow from the start of summer into later fall. So it's got a nice long season with it. And yeah, when you see those other species, that's a good reason to learn them, because come back in a few months and you might find the lobster growing there. Even though it is bright orange colored like that, a lot of times I'll find it in piney areas, and it does a good job of tucking in under the pine needles, and sometimes you'll just see a clump of it raised up and you clean it off and you find the mushroom under there. So it can get quite dirty, takes quite a bit of cleaning, but that hard exterior shell that actually is like a lobster shell holds up very well for being rinsed off. They dehydrate very easily, and they're definitely one that if you find one growing, there'll be more around them. In that picture there, I noticed that I was looking through my presentation. I probably shouldn't have picked some of them. They're starting to get a discolored to them. They'll get almost bright red to purple colors when they've gone bad. They almost crumble in your hands when you pick them. So they're one that you definitely kind of tap and feel how dense they are. Giant puffball is definitely one that has no lookalikes. This last late summer and fall was a very good year for them. We got the rains at just the right time, so they were growing everywhere. It's not my most favorite mushroom to eat. It doesn't have a ton of flavor to it, but if you add enough garlic and cook it in eggs, it's tolerable. I know I've seen people that will use it as a pizza crust. I tried that. I wasn't the biggest fan. I guess I prefer dough crust to it. You can dehydrate it, but I'm not allowed to in my house anymore because it gives off quite a scent. After you do that, and then if you have a little grinder that you can grind it up, it makes a good powder that you can add to soups or to use as a place of flour. They're just fun to look at. I remember even as a kid finding them when they were past their prime and always loving kicking on or stomping on them and making a big dust cloud. Just be careful not to breathe a lot of those spores in, because they can't be the best for your health always. There are other edible species of puffball that are a lot smaller, but there's caution with those because the Amanita species are the deadliest species of mushroom, and they start out in the egg form. And so they can look like little puffballs when they first emerge, so you want to slice through them and tell that they're white throughout. But I've done that with some of the Amanitas, and there's supposed to be a little faint outline of the mushroom, like cappings down in there. But I think it's pretty hard to tell, so I don't always mess with the smaller puffballs. So another favorite mushroom, just for the name alone, is the hedgehog mushroom. It's a cousin to the chanterelle mushroom, which is a very choice edible, and I'd say this one ranks up there. It's one of the few toothed mushrooms, kind of like lion's mane, but this one actually has like the stem and cap. Most mushrooms, this is a good example of a gilled mushroom, have these fan-like blades on them, and those are the ones that have a lot of toxic, it's typically a gilled mushroom, very few will be a polypore. There is a toothed mushroom that'll grow in tiny areas that doesn't look like a normal mushroom shape, and that'd be the only one that you may be confused with a hedgehog. There's lots of ones that when you're walking and you see the cap on top, you think I found a hedgehog, but you gotta turn it over and see, because several times where then I turn it over and see the gills on the underside and have to leave it since I'm not sure what mushroom that is. It's one of the few mushrooms that absorbs liquids when cooking, so I've got a few recipes for cooking that where it recommends cooking with bacon, which always makes things better, and it'll kind of absorb some of that bacon grease and flavor. I have dehydrated it. I don't think it holds up the best, so I prefer cooking it and freezing it, or I've seen pickling it. I haven't actually done that yet, but just kind of gotten into pickling mushrooms as a way of preserving them. And that's actually one of the species of chanterelles. It's its cousin, so they don't look the most alike, but they grow in similar areas. One of my favorite mushrooms to find now, I mean, morels are still up there, but black trumpet I spent probably at least 5+ years searching for. I don't think I was searching at the right time of year. I heard they like oak trees, kind of like chanterelles, because again, they're another cousin to the chanterelle and hedgehogs. I think the most difficult mushroom to see for my eyes. I really have to slow down and take a look. That's how I first noticed them, was hiking in an area, and I stopped to tie my shoe, and when I bent down I was like, oh, there's a cluster of black trumpets. So I looked around a little more and filled the basket. So it's another mushroom that grows in similar spots year after year. So once you find one, make a note of that one and check back. Usually late summer, early fall is when they start coming out after the rains. They grow in big clusters, like I said, so you do have to process a lot of them when you find them usually, but that's okay because they're such a thin and fragile mushroom, they dehydrate very nicely. And some of the mushrooms that didn't make the cut because they could be a little more confusing. I might want a little more experience before recommending, but just to mention them, so if you see them and take note of them, they're very fun. We got the golden oysters growing here. They have several species. They come in lots of different colors, white, you can grow blue ones, pink ones. Yeah, what's that?
You can usually get a lot of them in one place.
Yep, that is a good thing about it, and they dehydrate very well. They definitely have a seafood smell to them, so they're one that, just because they smell like a seafood, that doesn't mean they've gone bad. It's not so much the golden ones I find as the white ones that seem like insects really like them. They like them in chanterelles a lot, so that could be something else I could have added to lessons learned, is just because you find a mushroom, the quality of it can definitely matter for cooking it. Put bags of them in the fridge with a few bugs left in them, only to go to use them later and seeing that the bugs didn't stop eating, so they've kind of ruined a larger quantity. Then probably would have been better just to discard those mushrooms to begin with. The chanterelle is one that's nice too because they'll start coming out usually early July, maybe late June if conditions are right.
How big are they?
Chanterelles?
Yeah.
There's several species. Some of them are like just like an inch or two, but the big ones can get maybe like that big on top. They have what's called a false gill, so they're more just ridged. They kind of look like they have the blades on the bottom side of it. They have a very unique scent. It's very sweet, like an apricot. So it's a mushroom that has been used in desserts even. It made chanterelle ice cream. It was actually just chanterelles and a lot of sugar and some cream, but it was pretty tasty. Reishi mushroom I don't have a picture of, but I did bring what I like to do with them is turn them into a tincture. So soak them in vodka or a high alcohol content liquor for about 4 to 6 weeks in a jar, and then strain out the mushrooms. Add the same amount of water to a pot and boil them for a number of hours, and then combine the water and alcohol together. It's supposed to have a lot of health benefits. I think it's been used in Eastern medicine for a couple thousand years. It's referred to in their culture as the mushroom of immortality. It's supposed to have anti-tumor, anti-inflammatory properties, supposed to help boost your immune system, help with memory, help with getting a good night's sleep, get a little bit of energy from it. So I've tried it for a while now, and I can't say I noticed a lot of difference. It kind of has a black licorice flavor to it, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but add it to coffee and I don't really notice the flavor. And the last mushroom I was going to mention is the hen of the woods, which is another one that I search a lot of times for and don't find it very often, but just finding one is usually quite a good find. They're also called the sheep's head mushroom. Kind of see why, not really, if I squint. It's like I said, like a polypore mushroom, so it doesn't have gills or teeth. It just has like tiny little holes on the underside, which are probably the safest type of mushrooms. There's only one slightly toxic polypore that I know of, and all the other ones are just either too woody to eat or edible, so they're good ones to learn. Hen of the woods is also called maitake mushroom, and it is also being studied for lots of its health benefits. So again, we're hoping that they keep doing a lot of studies and finding maybe even some potential cures in mushrooms. Yeah, some of the sources, like I mentioned, Michael Kuo, he's very good. He's a pretty funny writer. Sam Thayer, he's got, I think, 4 books, and this was his newest one. Figured if I'm at a library, I better mention some books.
What's that one called? Foraging Starters?
That's his business. This one's the Field Guide to Wild Edible Plants, which I feel like is his first 3 books kind of combined, because it's definitely more plant-based, but he's got some interesting writing in the beginning of them too, just about foraging and kind of some of the ethics and thoughts that way. I don't think I had this lady's on there, but Victoria Romanoff, Mushroom Feasting, Foraging and Feasting. She was a cook at a 3-star Michelin restaurant in New York. So she's got some very good recipes in here and just kind of gives some of her tales of being out hunting. And it's a good one to read in the winter time when you are dreaming of nicer weather. Her story is kind of interesting of how she got into it. Her and her mom were in a concentration camp during World War II, and they kind of had to do it to survive, and became very popular with the people there that they'd bring back and share mushrooms with. So just a good read. And then here's another giant in the mushroom world, Gary Linkoff. Mushroom Hunter is the name of this book, and it's got more than just edible mushrooms in it. It's got a lot of medicinal mushrooms. It's got mushroom art ideas, so if you got kids, they might be interested to do some of the mushroom art. And yeah, it just kind of talks about different cultures' views of mushrooms, where the U.S., he kind of said, was more mycophobes, so we were a little afraid of mushroom, and other countries are mycophilias, where they love mushrooms and it's part of their culture. But it's definitely catching on here, and it's always nice to see. I used to get pretty competitive, especially in morel season, if you bump into other mushroom hunters. They always say mushroom hunters aren't the most honest people, and you ask them if you found any. But now it's kind of fun to see other people and just be like, oh, enjoying it out here, and yeah, hope you have good luck. And even come to a good looking tree and you find stems around it, it's good to know somebody else had good luck. And if you look around, I mean, people can't find them all. My wife always says that when we're driving this time of year on the hillside. I wonder how many mushrooms are just sitting on that hillside. Adam Harriton, he's got a YouTube channel, Learn Your Land, where he does different foraging for plants and mushrooms, or just tree ID. He teaches online courses, and I just kind of like his disposition and outlook on all things nature that way. Paul Stamets, as I mentioned, is another giant in the mushroom world. His fungi perfecti, which I haven't acquired yet, but he's got a great film that he's called Fantastic Fungi, where one of the points that he makes about them is the wood wide web, the mycelium in the ground. Every time you're stepping in the woods, you're stepping on mushrooms. You just don't see them because the mushrooms are the fruiting body. So it's pretty neat to think that mushrooms communicate with all of nature around them, with each other. Sometimes they're at war with each other. Mike Kempenich is a guy out of Minnesota that runs a company called Gentleman Forager. I took a course through him with UW Extensions because to sell mushrooms in Minnesota you have to get certified. And he does some things up in Minnesota area where he'll get like a couple bands together, some chefs from restaurants, and just make a weekend out of it and camp and have music and eat mushrooms. I've never attended one, but it's on the bucket list, and maybe even try to do something like that in this area if there's interest for it. And the last one I got is a good little mushroom guidebook by Teresa Marone and Kathy Urich. I think I said their names right, but they, I think, are in Minnesota as well, mushrooms of the upper Midwest. I wouldn't rely on it for all the facts, but it's got a lot more variety of species. It doesn't have every mushroom you'll come across here, but most likely a good chance it's got at least like 75% of the mushrooms growing around here. That'll wrap it up. It's been working for a while, so if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. No guarantees.
What do black trumpets taste like? They taste generally mushroomy, or they have
They're pretty subtle. They do really good in sauces, and just that black color is always fun to add to a dish. They're pretty subtle though. I know one of the recipes in this book he's got where you cook them and then chop them up with some green onion or chives and add the cream cheese, because mushrooms and cheese go wonderful together. It's a great dip or spread on. Like U.O. Gibbons has a section in one of his books about making mushroom toast. So whatever mushrooms you got on hand, cook them up and put them on a piece of toast. And that's a pretty gourmet meal in my opinion. Yeah.
A lot of times when you're getting back to morels, when you're hunting, you're talking about the pulse morels, which don't look anything like them. But you also find those ones with the really tall stems with just a knob on top.
Yep.
Look, are those the morels or what?
They're not a true morel. They're either the verpas, Bohemica verpa, or a half-free morel. And I've eaten them before, so I'd say they're edible, but I did just recently see somebody cautioning that they're ones that are kind of in the black morel family. So some people they don't sit well with. There's 19 species of morels at least. They're adding new species of mushrooms all the time. We have a lot of them growing here, not all the species, but black morels are one of the species of morels that you got to be careful with. Alcohol and morels, they don't always mix. There's several mushrooms like that, so there's being research done in that department, even as like the alcohol inky cap is one that's got a compound in it that is being used as kind of like getting people to help stop drinking, so there's a lot of good research going on with that. Yeah.
For chicken of the woods, how can you tell if it's too old, like past its prime, versus ripe and good to eat?
It's kind of like the coloring of it. It'll fade like a more pale orange color as it's been. It'll get very large too, and when you feel it, it'll feel a lot drier. If it's fresh, it's almost like spongy and very, very liquidy. Even so with that though, I forgot to mention that kind of the base right near the tree can be pretty woody and tough, so I like to just use the edge of it because you get plenty of it, and it's a mushroom that you don't want to eat too much of. I don't know if I did mention that at the beginning too, but just anytime you are trying a new mushroom for the first time, don't make a big plate of it and eat it, because it's a new food to your body. Some people mushrooms sit better with, so just try a very little bit. It's also a good idea, again by Michael Kula, says he doesn't try a new mushroom He wants to identify it at least 3 to 5 times correctly before he even thinks about trying it. Like I said, some of the beginner ones I've been a little more adventurous with because I didn't read his advice before that. But definitely, like, one of the ones that I've finally gotten brave enough to try is the wild enoki because its lookalikes is the deadly galernia. So you have to take a spore print, which sounds pretty technical, but all you do is take the mushroom cap and set it on a piece of white and a piece of dark paper and put a bowl over it and leave it overnight and see what color it is.
So that's the only way to tell the difference.
No, there's several. The deadly, that's the best way to be absolutely sure. They're different colored spores, but the wild enoki grows in big clusters, whereas the deadly galernia just will grow like single or maybe a couple. Like they'll cover a log, but they won't grow in the cluster form. And one of the nicknames of the enokis is velvet shanks because the stems will start to turn like black as they grow, and so that's a good indication that they're the right kind too. Yeah.
Have you ever had a bad reaction to eating those?
I think one time on Black Morels, I had a glass or two of wine with the dinner, and it wasn't very long afterwards that I was getting sick. But otherwise, I haven't tried any and had very bad reactions. The panther mushroom, like I said, is one that isn't deadly, but the description of it is scary. It says, for 24 to 48 hours, you and everyone around you will live through a horror movie because you just kind of do the same thing repetitively. And I think it's in Gary Minkoff's book saying that he saw a guy eat it and then sit on a bridge, fall off, get back up, sit on the bridge, fall off. So yeah, it can be scary. And then the other mushroom that I've always been leery of isn't deadly toxic either, but its nickname is the sweater because for 24 to 48 hours, you will sweat, salivate, and cry uncontrollably.
Does it sound like fun?
No.
I was just curious, if you're like at a state park, is it illegal to pick a mushroom?
It's always good to double check on the public land. In Wisconsin, yes. Public land you can't like pick for commercial use, it's just for personal consumption. We were hunting last year in Illinois for morels and found that they have a very bizarre rule that you can't mushroom hunt before 1 or 3 p.m. Which I thought, well, mushrooms don't care what time of day it is. But I guess it turns out because it even happens around here, but you run into turkey hunters, and mushroom hunters are known for not always dressing in the flashiest of colors. And it's a good idea, I guess.
You use your bones when you can jerky hunt in Canada.
Yeah, that's what I thought was a loophole. I could just go out on camera and say,
Yeah,
I'm a turkey hunter.
Turkey hunt. I have to find it.
Yeah.
Remember what Grandpa said, that was a good mushroom?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
My grandpa's piece of advice isn't the most ethical either, but if you ever get a mushroom and you're not sure, just give them to your neighbor, and if you see him next week, they're probably all right, well, thanks for coming out. And,
Well, thanks for tuning in. We'd like to wish congratulations to all of our viewers who are graduating from kindergarten through college. And I suppose it's time to be thinking about plans for Memorial Day. See you next week.